Welcome back to another Tech Junkie video. We've got a good one for you today. This iPhone X took a toilet bath and showed no signs of life when the customer brought it in. The first thing I noticed when I picked the phone up is the back glass just fell right off. It's indicative of a back glass replacement that's done with double-sided adhesive instead of cold-pressed glue. If that gets wet, it can come right off, and you can see the metal marks on the back housing. Shows where a blade or something was used to chisel away the glass if you do this method of replacement instead of using a laser machine. So we're going to take this back glass that's usable, it's fine, we're going to have to use cold pressed glue to put it back on the housing. Hopefully this phone comes back to life and it's not a wasted repair. So what we're going to do is set this to the side for now, and we'll do the back glass replacement after we see if the phone comes back to life. The first thing we do is pull the two pentalobe screws out of the bottom, and there are no pentalobe screws at the bottom. That is indicative of a repair that was done previously, and whoever the repair tech was did not put the screws back in. Being that as it were, the screen pops right off. There's no screws in the bottom. It's been repaired before. It's not hard to get the screen off if it's been repaired before. There are 5 tri-wing screws here that hold the LCD connector in place, as well as that ear speaker assembly. They are 3 different sizes, so you want to make sure you pattern your screws out to the correct location so you don't put a long screw back where a short screw goes. You can damage your board severely by doing this. Once you get that bracket off, you can disconnect your battery and your 3 screen cables, and then we're going to work on this battery here. I use 99% isopropyl alcohol to get batteries off where the pull tabs have been broken. This one had broken pull tabs on it, so I knew that the battery had probably been replaced previously. So with some alcohol and just a little bit of force, that battery popped right out. We can set that over to the side. Being that that battery showed no signs of life, we're going to test out the phone with a new battery and see if we can get this phone back to working order. First thing you do is test fit the battery in and connect it to make sure that your positioning is correct so that your battery can connect once it's in place. Then we're going to take the old screen and put it back on there before we reconnect the battery for good so that we can see if we can get this phone back on with the new battery. Now that we've got the screen reconnected and the battery reconnected, we can turn the power on and see if we can get this phone back to life. Apple logo pops up, so that's a good sign. We have life now. We didn't have life before, but as you see here, the Apple logo shuts back off and then it re-pops on. Pops back on, pops back off. So we know we have some type of hardware malfunction that causes that. It could be software, but it's more indicative of something that the water from the toilet damaged. The first thing I usually check when we get a boot looping Apple logo is the proximity sensor. The proximity sensor is part of the ear speaker and front Face ID sensor that's connected to the back side of the screen. If that proximity sensor gets damaged, and toilet water will do that, it can cause your phone to boot loop. So we're going to disconnect that and then reconnect the battery. If the screen pops on now without boot looping on the Apple logo and the phone powers on normally, then we know we need to replace that ear speaker assembly with the proximity sensor. And sure enough, with that proximity sensor disconnected, the screen powered on fine. Now you'll notice here that the screen is flickering a little bit and ghosting. Ghosting is indicative of a bad touchscreen. It can also be damaged by toilet water, and any water for that matter. It doesn't have to be toilet water. So we're going to replace the proximity sensor ear speaker assembly. We're also going to replace the screen and the battery. If you replace the ear speaker and Face ID module, unless you do micro soldering, you're going to lose Face ID. I don't do micro soldering, and I don't mind losing Face ID in this particular situation. So we're just going to replace the ear speaker assembly and screen. So we need these screws from this old ear speaker assembly, and we're going to transfer these screws over to our new screen with our ear speaker and our proximity sensor. So we're going to remove the 3 tri-wing screws, and we're going to pull this out, this ear speaker assembly out just for general purpose, so you know what it's like to remove this proximity sensor, and it just pops right out of this little plastic clip. We're going to replace this assembly with a new one and with a new screen. Luckily, I had a parts phone laying around, and I was able to salvage the ear speaker from that phone. So we had this on hand without having to order the parts. The screen is brand new, and we're going to get our 3 tri-wing screws replaced here. So after changing the battery, the ear speaker proximity sensor assembly, and the screen, the phone should power on and work perfectly fine. Once we get the phone to turn on, we will check the other functions of the phone to make sure that it's back to normal, at least without Face ID. We get all of these connectors pop back in place. They snap tight just like a little connector. You want to make sure all of your connections are back in place. Ear speaker connector popped off. You want to make sure each connection is tight, otherwise you're going to lose function. Once you get your connectors on there, you've got 5 tri-wing screws. Make sure the screws go back in the holes from which you pulled them from. You don't want to fry your board by putting a long screw where a short screw goes. I can't emphasize that enough. I've opened so many phones where the person put the wrong screw in the wrong hole, the phone was fried, and they didn't know what happened. You want to make sure your screws go back in the correct place. All right, that's all there is to it. We've got the screen done, we've got the battery done, we've got the ear speaker and the proximity sensor done. If everything's working normal, you just snap your teeth back in place. That's what I refer to the brackets that hold your screen down as. We're going to have to get some replacement screws for the bottom of the phone and just wait on the phone to boot up. If there's no ghosting, then we know for a fact that we've got the phone working back to the way it was previously. No ghosting. We checked the rear camera and the front camera. Both of those seem to be working good. No problem with the cameras. Now we want to check our speakers. Make sure that there's plenty of sound coming out of the bottom of the phone. No issues with the speakers either. So we've got a functional iPhone X with no Face ID now after a phone that we found that had no signs of life whatsoever. So the next thing we want to do now that we know we have a functioning iPhone X is we're going to replace that back glass with some actual glue. The first thing I want to do is prep the back glass that we had before, removing all the old double-sided tape. It cuts right off. It's been wet. It doesn't have its same adhesive capabilities. So we're just going to peel that off and use B7000. Generally, I use cold press glue, but my applicator tips were in the other room and I didn't want to have to get up and walk over to the other room while filming a video. So I use B7000. B7000 works fine. You just got to be careful about how much you put on. It tends to spread and smear a little bit more than the cold press glue, and you don't want it seeping out of your borders. Once you get that glue on there, you want to put rubber bands on there and let it dry for about an hour before you remove the rubber bands to make sure the glass doesn't slip or slide out of place, and then you can remove the rubber bands. That glass is on there nice and tight. The phone is back to normal minus Face ID. We successfully brought it back to life. You can't ask for anything more. So there you have it. Water damaged iPhone X, fished out of a toilet, back to its normal self at minus Face ID, and it works. So we're happy with the repair. Like I said before in the previous videos, I love doing these repairs every day. It makes me feel like I'm productive, actually taking something that's dead and bringing it back to life. So if you want to see more of these videos, make sure you click that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. The bell will tell you every time we post a new video. We try to post videos daily. I appreciate all the support. We're slowly growing this channel, and I love it. And we'll keep posting content. Stay tuned for the next one.